We live in a world of skeptics. It's part of our modern fiber. The scientific method is ingrained in our DNA. Added to this is the social lack of trust that has been growing steadily. Trust no one. Yet some people trust the same source while others would rather see it destroyed. Such is the case with the Bible. It's both hated and revered by billions. One of the aspects people address on both sides of trust and skepticism is the historicity of the Bible. Was there truly a patriarch named Abraham? Can we really believe there existed an ethnic group called Israelites that was enslaved in Egypt and then they were freed by a guy named Moses? All those kings of Israel, David, Solomon, and the others, did they really exist? Or were they simply an invention that served nationalistic propaganda? These are constant questions posed by scholars over the past 2 centuries. And because scholars say it with authority, many believe them. What's interesting is that other ancient sources aren't approached the same way as the Bible is by many scholars. If cuneiform tablet is found in Mesopotamia, or hieroglyphs are found in Egypt, scholars give their best to read it and assert what is true and what is not. And that is normal skepticism. But when it comes to the Bible, many scholars approach it not from a point of skepticism, but from a point of bias. Guilty until proven innocent. It shouldn't be this way, be it the Bible or any other ancient source. It should be innocent until proven guilty. At least that's what the modern justice system aims for. Imagine we didn't have the Bible. Nobody knew of this literary source. All of a sudden, some archaeologists in the Middle East discover this massive collection of manuscripts in some dry caves, something similar to the Qumran scrolls. How would the world approach this library of books? 66 books written over a period of more than a millennium. It would be the hottest archaeological discovery of the moment, bigger than the Qumran scrolls themselves. I tend to think there would be skepticism towards these manuscripts, but more scholars would also consider that there are many historical events described in it. There would be much more openness to the content of these scrolls. You might doubt there is bias against the Bible. Let me give you some examples that prove otherwise. Many new articles have been saying for years that camels contradict the Bible. Their assertion is based on a journal article. Dr. Ben Yosef and Dr. Sapir Hen of Tel Aviv University have used radiocarbon dating to pinpoint the moment when domesticated camels arrived in the southern Levant, pushing the estimate from the 12th to the 9th century BC. This is what AI says about this article. The findings published in the journal Tel Aviv further emphasize the disagreements between biblical text and verifiable history and define a turning point in Israel's engagement with the rest of the world. Let's see what they state in their article. The new evidence indicates that the first significant appearance of camels in the Arava Valley was not earlier than the last third of the 10th century BCE. This date accords with data from the Negev and the settled land further to the north when the low chronology is applied to the early Iron 2A. The article is technical and it even mentions the depictions of camels in the patriarchal narrative, meaning the Bible. What does this mean? Abraham lived, according to scholarly consensus, sometime around the 20th to the 18th century BC. The Bible mentions he had domesticated camels, see Genesis 24. But this 2013 study done by scholars couldn't find domesticated camel bones in Israel before the year 1000 BC. Therefore, it must mean the Bible is lying because this is an anachronism. Case closed. Well, hold your horses, or I should say camels. There are scholars who contradict this theory. This is bias, not only skepticism, and I will prove it to you. The fact that the earliest bones of domesticated camels are not found before 1000 BC doesn't mean there were no domesticated camels. As is many times stated in archaeology, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Suppose archaeologists in the year 3000 AD wanted to date when cell phones were invented. Let's say the earliest proof of a cell phone they find in the ground is from 2200 AD. Does that mean that's when cell phones were invented? Certainly not. Fortunately, we also have written proof as well. A researcher goes online and finds out the earliest cell phone was a prototype invented by Motorola in 1973 AD. Which of the two sources should one believe? The earliest archaeological attestation or the written source? So is the case with camels. I'm sure we won't find the first domesticated camel in Canaan. It's impossible. Fortunately, We also have written sources from the Bronze Age that depict or mention domesticated camels. The authors of the article dismiss dating of earlier camel figurines and drawings as debatable, concluding that these represent at most the acquaintance of ancient people with wild camels. On the other side, Martin Heide and Joris Peters wrote a whole book, not an article, about camels in ancient sources, over 400 pages. They also studied the archaeology, the ancient texts, the different words used for camels from the earliest time to the 1st century AD. They covered 5,000 years of archaeological data. Their conclusion? Two-humped camels were domesticated by the mid-3rd millennium BC in regions like Central Asia. That's around 2500 BC. For one-humped camels, called dromedary, domestication occurred around the same period in southern eastern Arabia, with evidence from bones, texts, and artifacts supporting use as pack animals and for milk by the early 2nd millennium BC. That gives over half a millennium for these domesticated camels to reach Mesopotamia, where Abraham came from, or Canaan. They dedicate a whole chapter to the biblical texts that mention camels. They are very thorough. They approach the topic linguistically, archaeologically, and scientifically. Here is a quote that gives a partial conclusion of the authors. During the 2nd millennium BC, camels were neither commonly exploited nor locally bred in the Levant. The camel occurrences in the Genesis narratives are therefore peculiar, revealing a distinct sort of wealth and special usage associated with these animals. The authors don't doubt camels were present in Canaan during the first half of the 2nd millennium BC. They emphasize Abraham wasn't a Canaanite local, but moved with his fortune, including camels, from Mesopotamia to Canaan. For more information, I encourage to read Camels in the Biblical World. It's a very thorough book on the topic, probably the most thorough book on the topic. You see why I think some people are not only skeptics, but biasers? You won't find this word in the dictionary, I just made it up. A huge fuss was made about this article around 2014. So many sources argue that this proves the Bible is wrong about camels. New York Times and many big newspapers promoted a provable lie as being truth. After all, it was written in a reputable academic journal. How could it be wrong? Bart Ehrman, one of the biggest skeptics of the Bible according to some, one of the biggest biasers according to others, posted about this clear proof of camels being anachronistic to the patriarchal times. Never mind the camels, Ehrman doubts the patriarchs themselves. He said it himself many times that he doubts their existence. Absence of archaeological proof is not proof of complete absence. As stated, written and depicted sources like those presented by Heide and Peters can be closer to reality. Okay, so you may say, that's one case. So what? But the thing is, it's not just one case. The bias is seen ever so often. There was never a guy called David that founded an Israelite dynasty because we don't have any archaeological proof of his existence. Yes, this case was made for many decades in the 1900s. Why? Because there wasn't an extra biblical confirmation of David's existence or his dynasty. Whoopsie, then this stone carved by an Aramean king mentions the house of David. Teldan Stele, discovered in 1993, proved there was a Davidic dynasty in the 9th century mentioned by an enemy dynasty. It mentioned the house of David. These are just two short examples of when scholars got it wrong. Even the consensus can get it wrong sometimes. I'm not saying we should challenge the consensus all the time, but I hate to break it to you. That's how science works. It challenges the consensus, not with bias, but with reasonable doubt. So, are you a skeptic or a biaser? Of course, nobody would consider themselves a biaser, but we are sometimes. I understand skepticism. It's reasonable to be skeptic. But there is a difference between being a skeptic and having bias. I encourage you to read the Bible, even if you do it with skepticism. Read it at least as you would read any other ancient source. Read it as if it's a written source discovered in the ground yesterday. Just make sure you don't do it with bias. Read those parts you'll enjoy. I'm sure you'll be marveled by the literary genius of some of the books in the Bible.